The only sound was the soft microfiber against the rifle's scope, until the Master Sergeant's metal-cased tablet crashed onto the concrete. He wasn't looking at the weapon. He was staring at the impossible numbers etched on her memorial tag. The air inside the advanced armory at Nellis Air Force Base was a lie. It was chilled, sterile, and smelled of ozone and gun oil, a man-made bubble of control floating in a vast, unforgiving Mojave Desert. Outside, the heat warped the horizon into a shimmering mirage, and the constant, soul-shaking roar of F-35s tearing holes in the sky was the only true religion. For Elara Vance, this lie was a sanctuary. Her movements were a study in practiced economy. Each wipe of the microfiber cloth, each click of a bolt being inspected, a deliberate act of meditation. For 3 years, this had been her penance and her peace, bringing order to instruments of chaos. She wasn't just cleaning. She was communing with the steel and glass, her focus so absolute that the world beyond her workstation ceased to exist. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a severe, regulation bun, not a single strand daring to escape. Her gray coveralls were immaculate, a stark contrast to the grease and solvents she worked with. To the casual observer, she was a ghost in the machine, a hyper-efficient maintenance technician who preferred the company of rifles to people. This perception was a carefully constructed fortress, and behind its walls, a legend lay dormant. Today, the rhythmic tranquility was fractured by the arrival of a pararescue team. They didn't walk. They flowed into the space, their presence instantly changing the atmospheric pressure. They carried the quiet, coiled intensity of men who jump into hell for a living. Leading them was a Master Sergeant whose name tape read Thorne. He moved with a predator's grace, his eyes, the color of a storm-tossed sea, missing nothing. They swept across the racks of perfectly maintained weapons, acknowledging Elara with a curt, professional nod before turning his attention to the inventory list on his ruggedized tablet. His team, equally imposing, fanned out, their examination of the equipment beginning with a seriousness that bordered on religious reverence. For them, a faulty piece of gear wasn't an inconvenience. It was a tombstone. Elara felt the shift in the air, a familiar prickle on her skin that she hadn't experienced since before. She kept her head down, her focus locked on the Barrett .50 cal before her, its massive frame dwarfing the workbench. She could feel Thorne's occasional glance, the analytical weight of it. He was evaluating more than the weapons. He was evaluating the entire environment, including the quiet woman who seemed to be a part of the fixtures. Her inner monologue, a voice she had long tried to silence, began to whisper. They see what you want them to see. A nobody. Safe. It was the mantra that had kept her sane, the lie that had kept her alive. She deliberately slowed her breathing, pushing the voice back down into the dark, quiet place where it belonged. The high-pitched whine of a distant jet engine provided a welcome distraction, a sound of immense power kept at a safe distance. Just like her past. After completing her work on the Barrett, Elara moved to the last item on her manifest. A Remington M2010 enhanced sniper rifle. A surgeon's scalpel compared to the Barrett's sledgehammer. A flicker of something. Nostalgia, pain, a ghost of an echo, stirred within her as her gloved fingers traced the weapon's familiar lines. This was a tool she understood on a cellular level. She leaned in closer, her attention consumed by a persistent smudge on the Leupold scope's objective lens. As she angled her body for better leverage, a small, dark object slipped from beneath the collar of her coveralls, swinging free for a heartbeat on its thin chain. It wasn't a standard-issue dog tag. It was a custom-made piece of blackened steel, hexagonal and matte, designed not to catch the light. It was a memorial tag, a private tribute to a fallen brother in arms. And etched into its surface, so small they were almost invisible, were a set of coordinates and a number, 2940M. Master Sergeant Thorne had been half listening to his comms expert, Petty Officer Hex Miller, rattle off specs, but his peripheral vision caught the subtle, unnatural swing of the metal. His gaze flicked from his tablet to the woman, to the tag. Time seemed to warp, the ambient hum of the armory's ventilation system fading into a dull roar in his ears. 2,940 meters. The number wasn't just a number. It was a legend. A ghost story whispered in classified debriefs and at the back of quiet military bars. His fingers went numb. The ruggedized tablet, built to withstand a 6-foot drop, slipped from his grasp. It hit the polished concrete floor with a sickening crack, the impact echoing through the cavernous space like a gunshot. The Gorilla Glass screen, which had survived training exercises in Afghanistan, now sported a spiderweb of fractures emanating from the point of impact. Hex and the other PJ fell silent, their heads snapping toward their leader. Thorne was frozen, his face a mask of disbelief. He wasn't looking at the shattered screen of his tablet. He was staring at Elara, who had straightened up, her expression a mixture of surprise and alarm. She instinctively tucked the tag back into her uniform, but it was too late. The damage was done. Thorne's mind was a maelstrom. A classified file, flagged with more security warnings than the president's daily brief, materialized in his memory. It was the file on Delta Force Operator Call Sign, Nix, a sniper of almost mythical ability. The report detailed an operation in the Hindu Kush Mountains, where a single, impossible shot from 2,940 meters had decapitated an entrenched enemy command structure, saving an entire Ranger platoon from annihilation. It was a shot that defied physics, a 1 in a billion engagement. And according to that same file, Nix had been killed in action 3 years ago, her body lost in a subsequent ambush. The official record was unequivocal. Nix was dead. Yet, the proof of her defining impossible act was hanging around the neck of a maintenance worker in the middle of the Nevada desert. The shattered screen on the floor was a perfect metaphor for what had just happened to his understanding of the world. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. She watched Thorne bend down, his movements stiff and unnatural, and retrieve the damaged tablet. He didn't curse or show any frustration at the broken device. He simply straightened up, his stormy eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that stripped away her carefully constructed anonymity. The professional distance was gone, replaced by a piercing, analytical focus that felt like a targeting laser painting her chest. "Everything all right, Master Sergeant?" she asked, her voice impressively steady, a product of years of disciplined control over her own physiology. "Just lost my grip," Thorne replied, his voice a low, gravelly tone. But it was a lie, and they both knew it. His gaze didn't leave her, and he made a subtle, almost imperceptible gesture with his hand to Hex. It was a command, silent and swift. Hex, a wiry man with a reputation for being more comfortable with code than with people, gave a slight nod and turned away, discreetly tapping at the wrist-mounted computer on his arm. The hunt had begun. Elara forced herself to turn back to the M2010, her hands moving with automated precision. But her senses were on fire. The survival instincts that had been forcibly sedated for 3 years were now screaming awake. Every hum of the fluorescent lights, every distant footstep, every whisper of the ventilation was magnified, processed, and categorized as a potential threat. She was no longer Elara Vance, armory technician. She was Nix, and the hunter had just become the hunted. She could feel the invisible net tightening. Minutes stretched into an eternity. From across the armory, she saw Hex approach Thorne, his expression grim. He spoke in a low voice, but Elara's trained eyes could read the tension in his body language. Thorne's jaw tightened as he listened. The message from Hex was more damning than a smoking gun. He had run Elara Vance's service number, social security, and biometrics through every database he could access, both official and less so. The results were terrifyingly clean. Her digital footprint had sprung into existence exactly 3 years ago. She had a plausible, if unremarkable, service record as a supply specialist, glowing performance reviews at Nellis, and 0 red flags. But before that date, Elara Vance did not exist. There were no school records, no birth certificate flagged in a national system, no childhood photos on any forgotten social media platform. It was as if she had been willed into being by a ghost. Her entire identity was a perfectly sculpted shell, a digital deepfake so flawless that its very perfection was the ultimate flaw. It was a level of cover reserved for the deepest, most protected assets, or for someone who was supposed to be dead. Thorne dismissed Hex and began to walk toward her. His stride was deliberate, unhurried, but it carried the weight of an unavoidable conclusion. Elara's mind raced, cataloging escape routes, calculating response times of the base's security forces, weighing her options. But there were no good options. She was inside a fortress, surrounded by the most elite soldiers in the world. Running would be an admission of guilt. Fighting would be suicide. All she could do was stand her ground and play the role she had chosen until the final curtain fell. The lie, her only shield for 3 years, felt terrifyingly thin. Thorne didn't stop at her workstation. He walked past it, his voice low but carrying an undeniable authority. "Vance, the M2010's optics need a final calibration check. Bring it. My office." It wasn't a request. Her mind screamed in protest, but her body, conditioned by years of military hierarchy, complied. She secured the rifle in a transport case and followed him, her boots echoing his heavier footfalls on the concrete. He led her not to a standard office, but to a small, soundproofed weapons testing chamber in the corner of the armory, a place designed to absorb the deafening report of a high-caliber rifle. The heavy steel door closed behind them with a heavy, final thud, sealing them in. The silence was absolute, suffocating. Thorne didn't bother with pretenses. He didn't mention the weapon or the calibration. He simply turned to face her, the fractured screen of his tablet still in his hand, a silent accusation. The air crackled with unspoken tension. He wasn't a master sergeant questioning a technician anymore. He was an operator confronting an anomaly, a threat to the established order of things. Elara placed the rifle case on a table, her movements precise, betraying none of the turmoil raging within her. She stood her ground, meeting his gaze, her back straight, her hands loosely at her sides. The hunter and the ghost, face to face in a soundproof box. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper, a sound meant only for her, a sound that could shatter worlds. He didn't ask about the 2,940 meters. He didn't ask about her past or the impossibly clean record. He bypassed all the logical steps of interrogation and went straight for the heart. Nix, the name, the call sign she hadn't heard spoken aloud in 3 years. It hit her with the force of a physical blow, bypassing all her defenses and striking the core of her true self. For a fraction of a second, her mask of placid competence crumbled, revealing a flash of the warrior beneath, a flicker of pain, of loss, of lethal capability in her eyes. It was there and gone in an instant, but Thorne saw it. He knew. She exhaled slowly a long, controlled breath. Denial was pointless. He hadn't asked a question. He had stated a fact. She could see the certainty in his eyes. Her carefully constructed world, her sanctuary of lies, had just been reduced to ashes. But if she was going down, she wouldn't make it easy. She tilted her chin up, a subtle act of defiance. "Official records state that Nix died for her country, Master Sergeant," she replied, her voice cold and even a perfect parry. "Are you questioning the official records?" It was both a confirmation and a challenge, an admission wrapped in a threat. The statement hung in the sterile, soundproofed air between them, a declaration that the woman he was looking for was buried under layers of classification and secrecy he had no authority to disturb. She had just drawn a line in the sand, daring him to cross it. The ghost was no longer hiding. She was pushing back. Thorne didn't flinch. He recognized her response for what it was, the move of a cornered professional, not a panicked fugitive. He had her, but he also knew that exposing her through official channels would entangle them both in a bureaucratic nightmare of classified inquiries that could end careers, or worse. Military intelligence had buried Nix for a reason. Digging her up would attract the wrong kind of attention from very powerful, very shadowy people. So, he chose a different path. "The official records say what they need to say," he countered, his voice matching her cool professionalism. "But I'm not in the business of reading history. I'm in the business of solving problems. And I have a problem that I think only Nyx can solve. Elara's eyes narrowed. This was unexpected. She had anticipated interrogation, arrest, the complete implosion of her life. Not a job offer. I'm a maintenance technician, Master Sergeant. And I'm just a medic who jumps out of helicopters. Thorne shot back, a hint of dry humor in his tone. We are what our records say we are. Until we're not. I'm proposing an arrangement. Something that exists outside the records. A ghost asset for a ghost problem. You help my team, and I make sure Elara Vance's record remains as pristine and boring as it is now. Your secret stays buried. No one ever knows Nyx walked out of those mountains. The offer was audacious, insane, and deeply tempting. The thought of putting her skills to use again, of having a purpose beyond the meditative cleaning of weapons, was a siren's call to a part of her soul she thought she had killed. But the risks were astronomical. Operating off the books meant no support, no backup, no official existence. If something went wrong, she would be disavowed. A true ghost. My participation would be conditional, she stated, shifting from the defensive to a position of negotiation. It was a language she understood. Absolute anonymity. No record of my involvement, ever. Full operational autonomy within the mission parameters. And I reserve the right to walk away. No questions asked if I feel my security is compromised. Thorne listened, nodding slowly. Her demands were the professional terms of a Tier 1 operator, not the pleas of a discovered deserter. Agreed, he said without hesitation. But I need to know if the weapon is still as sharp as the legend says. I need verification. What kind of verification? A practical demonstration. Tonight, there's a private range in the desert, run by ex-contractors. They don't ask questions as long as you pay in cash. 2,200 hours. Be there. He slid a small, encrypted data chip across the table. It contained the coordinates and nothing else. The ultimatum was clear. Show up and prove she was still Nyx, or disappear and take her chances with the official channels he would be forced to pursue. The choice was hers. He turned and opened the heavy steel door, flooding the small room with the normal sounds of the armory again. The moment of confrontation was over. The negotiation had begun. Elara stood alone in the silence for a long moment, the small data chip feeling impossibly heavy in her palm. For 3 years, she had chosen safety. Thorne was offering her purpose, wrapped in unimaginable risk. The question was, which did she crave more? The desert at night was a different beast. The oppressive heat of the day had bled into the sand, but the air was cool and crisp. A brilliant, full moon hung in the inky black sky, illuminating the stark landscape in an ethereal, silvery light. The private range was exactly as Thorne had described, a collection of hardened structures and firing lanes carved into the base of a rocky butte, miles from anywhere. It was a place for men with secrets to practice the art of making them permanent. Thorne was already there, leaning against a sand-colored pickup truck. A state-of-the-art rifle case lay at his feet. He wasn't in uniform, but in practical civilian gear that did nothing to hide his military bearing. As Elara pulled up, he simply nodded, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said, his voice a low rumble that didn't carry far in the open air. "Neither was I," she admitted, stepping out of her unassuming sedan. He led her to the farthest firing lane. The silence was profound, broken only by the crunch of their boots on the gravel and the distant howl of a coyote. Thorne opened the case, revealing a customized Cadex Defense CDXMC Kraken, a multi-caliber rifle currently configured for .338 Lapua Magnum. It was outfitted with a Schmidt and Bender PM2 scope with a Horus Tremor 3 reticle and a clip-on thermal imager. It was a professional's tool, worth more than her car. "It's been 3 years," she said, more to herself than to him. "It felt like a lifetime." "Muscle memory is a funny thing," Thorne replied, setting up a spotting scope. Elara approached the rifle. The moment her fingers touched the cold, textured chassis, something shifted inside her. It was like a key turning in a lock that had been rusted shut for 1,000 days. She shouldered the weapon, the familiar weight settling into her body as if it were a missing limb. Her breathing deepened, slowed. The world narrowed to the reticle in the scope. She worked the bolt, the smooth, mechanical action, a piece of music she hadn't realized she missed. Thorne watched, saying nothing. He saw the transformation. The quiet, reserved maintenance worker vanished, replaced by a creature of immense focus and stillness. Nix was looking through that scope. Her first shots were at a 1,200-meter steel plate. She didn't just hit it. She placed 5 rounds into a group the size of a fist, compensating for the gentle night breeze as if she could see the air currents themselves. But Thorne needed more. "There's a reactive target at 1,500 meters, he said, pointing to a tiny speck in the distance. "It moves on an unpredictable track. You have one shot the moment it exposes itself." Elara adjusted her calculations, her mind a ballistic computer processing humidity, temperature, elevation, and even the slight rotation of the Earth. She waited. Her stillness was absolute. For a full minute, nothing happened. Then for a brief 3-second window, the target plate slid into view. The rifle cracked, a single, sharp report that ripped through the desert silence. A second later, the satisfying ping of the bullets striking steel echoed back to them. A perfect hit. She cleared the weapon and stood up, the spell broken. The test was over. She had given him her proof. Thorne lowered himself from the spotting scope, a look of profound respect on his face. "The legend doesn't do you justice," he said quietly. He then packed up the scope, his movements all business. The time for testing was over. The time for the truth had arrived. The asset is a CIA analyst, captured by insurgents in Yemen 2 days ago. He holds the key to our entire drone program in the region. If they break him, our operations will be blind for years. A conventional rescue is impossible. They're holding him in a fortified position in the mountains. The only way in is if someone can clear a path for my team. A very long, very narrow path. He turned to face her, the moonlight carving his features into a grim mask. They have 9 high-threat sentries on overlapping watch, covering all approaches. They think they're untouchable. They think no one can reach them. I need a ghost to prove them wrong. Elara stood in the cold, humming interior of a mobile command center, a nondescript semi-trailer that was a marvel of covert technology. The briefing was already underway on a massive holographic map, displaying a jagged, hostile section of the Yemeni highlands. Thorne's PJ team and a handful of intelligence specialists were present, their faces grim and focused. When Elara entered, a brief silence fell. They saw a civilian woman, her features hardened by the desert night, and they saw the absolute trust Thorne placed in her as he gestured for her to join the inner circle. "This is our Overwatch," Thorne announced, his voice leaving no room for questions. "Codename, Nyx. She is our entry key. Her word is final on all matters of long-range engagement." The name sent a ripple of recognition through the intel analysts. The operators just nodded, accepting it. In their world, results were the only resume that mattered. The mission, unofficially codenamed Phoenix Protocol, was as complex as it was desperate. The 9 sentries were positioned in fortified nests carved into the mountainside, their fields of fire creating a perfect kill box. Elara would have to neutralize all 9 of them, at ranges varying from 1,800 to over 2,200 meters, within a 60-second window. The moment the first shot was fired, a clock would start. If even one sentry managed to raise an alarm, the hostage would be executed. But there was another layer. The insurgent leader, a man named Al-Khari, has a single escape vehicle, the intel officer said, highlighting a battered technical pickup truck on the map. If the assault begins, he will use it to flee with the hostage. "We can't let that happen. You want to take out the truck?" Elara asked, her eyes already calculating trajectories. "Negative," Thorne interjected. "A missile strike is too loud, too overt. I need that truck disabled, not destroyed. I need you to put a .338 round through the engine block. A kill shot on a machine from over 2,000 meters." It was an audacious, almost impossible tactical request. It required a level of precision that went beyond marksmanship into the realm of artistry. She would have to thread a needle through a hurricane, not just to kill, but to control the battlefield. Her response came without hesitation, a calm voice in a room thick with tension. Give me accurate atmospherics and a stable platform. I'll give you your 60 seconds and a dead truck. Hours later, she was on a transport plane, the roar of the engines a familiar lullaby. As she assembled her rifle, the one from the test, she felt the last vestiges of Elara Vance, the maintenance worker, fall away. The muscle memory, the tactical mindset, the cold, focused clarity of the hunter. It all came flooding back, not as a memory, but as a reclaiming of her true self. Her encrypted comms crackled to life in her earpiece. It was Thorne from the cockpit. Ready for the jump, Nix? She chambered around, the sound a definitive metallic click. It was an answer and a promise. Nix is online. The mission was a symphony of violence conducted with surgical precision. From a rocky perch high in the Yemeni mountains, Elara became a phantom. 9 shots, 9 silent falls, all within 54 seconds. The final round, aimed at the pickup truck, was the masterpiece. The bullet punched through the grille and shattered the engine block, oil and steam erupting from the dead vehicle. The path was clear. Thorne's team stormed the compound, and the hostage was recovered without a single casualty on their side. The Phoenix had risen from the ashes. Weeks later, Elara was back in the sterile, controlled quiet of the Nellis Armory. The scent of gun oil was no longer a reminder of a life left behind, but a component of her perfect camouflage. She wore the gray coveralls of Elara Vance, her movements as meticulous and unassuming as ever. Her colleagues saw the same quiet, efficient woman. They had no idea she had just returned from a war zone, that the faint tan on her skin wasn't from the Nevada sun, but from the harsh glare of the Arabian Peninsula. Master Sergeant Thorne visited the armory the following week for a routine equipment inspection. He walked through the aisles, his expression professional, his questions directed at her supervisor. But as he passed her workstation, his eyes met hers for a fleeting second. There was no overt sign of recognition, no word of thanks. There didn't need to be. In that single, shared glance, a volume of understanding passed between them. Respect, gratitude, and a shared burden of a lethal secret. He knew who she was, and she knew he would protect her. Elara turned back to the rifle she was cleaning, the microfiber cloth moving in slow, deliberate circles. Her life now existed on 2 parallel tracks. By day, she was the ghost in the machine, the invisible woman who kept the weapons of war in perfect condition. By night, when the call came, she became the ghost behind the trigger, the impossible legend made real. The maintenance job was no longer a sanctuary or a prison. It was a shield, the perfect cover for the most dangerous woman nobody knew existed. Her new war wasn't fought on a declared battlefield, but in the spaces between the lines, a shadow war where her only allies were a handful of men who knew the truth. The world believes Nix is a ghost, a legend buried in the mountains. But Master Sergeant Thorne knows the truth. What do you believe drives a person to embrace the shadows for a greater cause? Share your thoughts below. And if this story moved you, please hit that like, subscribe, and share it with a friend. Always remember to comment with respect for each other's views.